How's it going, everybody? How's it going? I'm pretty sure the audio is working this time, so thanks for being here. Thanks for the heads up. Thanks for the reminder, Art, because we're doing this live. I always got to make sure that the audio is live with us. Anyways, I wanted to thank everybody for being here again with us today for day 2 of the summit. I'm super honored that you guys are here with me. I'm super honored that we got to do all this stuff, and especially for the panel coming up right now with Jef Kethley, longtime friend of ours. He's been with the show for a long time. Great mentor to me. I've been working with him on a bunch of projects, and every time I do a show with him, it's literally like I'm the green guy in the room compared to the team he's with all the time. And I think if you guys watch Jef next with the talk he has at this panel, you might feel the same way. So again, I don't want to take too much of your time, guys. So I'll let Jef do what he does best. And Jef, go ahead and take it away, brother.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jef Kethley. I live in Texas, Beaumont, Texas, right outside of Houston. I own a couple of companies. One of them is Pizzazz Productions, which we've been around for over 35 years now. And my other company is Live Sports, which is a 10-year-old company now. We just turned 10, and that company deals with primarily broadcasting live sports, both on the internet and through TV channels. Pizzazz, on the other hand, is kind of our overall production company that takes care of more non-broadcast type events, and also is our system integration company. I have a couple of friends of mine and clients that have been with me for a few years now, and we've definitely got some history, and so really excited to have them join in. I'm going to introduce you first as Blue Melnick, and he is from Sage, in a beautiful town in South Carolina. Go ahead, Blue.
Yes. South Carolina, Murrells Inlet. Hey, Jef, thank you very much for having me join you on this panel. Really excited to be talking about virtual and hybrid events today. My company is Sage Event Management, and if my wife were sitting next to me, she'd probably look at me a little sideways and go, "Your company?" It's a company she started in 2004, and I kind of married into around 2009. And up until last year, we were primarily an in-person live event production company. And of course, like the rest of the world, somewhere around March of 2021, we did a hard pivot to virtual and have produced somewhere in the area of about 50 events over the course of the last 15 months with about 400,000 attendees virtually in that time frame. So excited about virtual and to share some thoughts on hybrid. We also have a company that has been birthed over the course of the last year called Obvio, which is a virtual event platform. Happy to chat a little bit about that, but I think we're here primarily to talk about hybrid events. Jef?
And the next person we have with us is Phil Grimpo. 20-year friend or something? 20 plus years?
Yeah.
We've been hanging around each other way too long, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And Phil is from another beautiful town in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Phil, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, we're right in the center of the country, which means we can get everywhere and can't get anywhere at the same time. Inspiramedia is 2020 was our 20th year in business, so it was our big 20th year kickoff, and we had a big event to celebrate our 20th year, and then the next week COVID happened. We do live event production, audio, video, and sound. Probably a couple years ago, I said we're really going to put more money and focus on the video side, which was a good, preemptive move to what happened with COVID. So we have Inspiramedia Productions, which does integration, but also live events, from corporate events to some touring, arena events, convention centers. And then I also have Inspira Meetings with a couple of partners in Denver and down in Orlando. And we do meeting event planning, helping plan content, but then also that was pretty integral in helping guide people through doing the hybrid and streaming events this last year.
You've been busy. I've been loving hearing all the stories about everything that's been going on. Our main talk today, our title of this is Going Hybrid, Streaming Large-Scale In-Person Live Events. So, hybrid. There's a lot of different definitions on hybrid, but the main thing about hybrid is what? It's people on-site and people off-site. So, basically, people in the virtual world are streaming, and how do you mix between the two? So this is a very passionate thing for a couple of us here, And I think we have some very unique ideas about it. So I'm going to open up the Pandora's box here. And just so you know, both Blue, who's in one of his studios that he has there, I just toured his studios and helped him build a LED wall there. And then Phil is actually in his studio that he created during the pandemic. That is phenomenal also, that has an LED wall in the back. So they've been doing a lot of virtual events. And now as we're moving towards this, quote, hybrid world, we definitely have some input about that. So I'm going to open up the box. Blue, do you think hybrid events are effective?
No. Do you want me to continue, or just it is a one-word answer? I do not think they're effective.
We can stop now.
All right. So let me say this from a production perspective, right? From an AV production perspective, I think hybrid events are going to be where the industry goes over the course of the next year or so. And I think they're going to go there because hosts have had, if they've done virtual well, they've had a good amount of success with their virtual events. And before then, they had a good amount of success with their live in-person events. And they're thinking to themselves, well, this worked well and that worked well. Why don't we just do them at the same time and reduce our costs a little bit and try and serve both audiences? And I think from a production perspective, a lot of us are going to be forced to do hybrid events in order to satisfy our clients' desires and needs. However, having done a couple of hybrid events already, I can tell you the single biggest challenge with hybrid events is that you are producing not one hybrid event. You are producing two different events with two vastly different experiences for two completely different audiences. And trying to get the mix right. Like one of the things that we did, I think, fairly well with your help, Jeff, over the course of the last year is produce virtual events that had amazing success and had attendees saying, this was the best event I've ever been to. Not this was the best virtual event. This was the best event I've ever been to. Prior to that, live stream of events that were in person always felt like fly on the wall experiences, right? Like I'm watching something else happening. I'm not really part of it. But this year, virtual took a massive step forward and we were able to interact with virtual audiences the way we never could before because there was no distraction of in person. So now that you're bringing in person back in, how do hosts, how do speakers interact with the virtual audience and the in-person audience at the same time? And it's really, really hard to do. And most speakers, even some of the best speakers in the world, can't serve two masters. So those are some of my thoughts as to, from a production perspective, I think it's really smart to be ready for hybrid because your clients are going to want to do it. But I don't think hybrid is long for this world because I think people are going to recognize, well, my virtual event didn't, or the virtual side of my hybrid event didn't succeed the same way my virtual event did. And my in-person event suffered because we were trying to service this other audience that wasn't in person. So it's a tough thing to balance. So those are some initial thoughts, and I'm sure we can continue that conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have a lot of that same thought too. Now, Phil, you being more of a on-site producer, you just went into the virtual side in the last year with a few events, and those are basically more. Were they virtual? Would you consider them virtual events, or were they more just studio shots and streams?
A little bit of both. I mean, we didn't, for me, I mean, I agree with everything Blue is saying. I probably don't take as much of a hard line on no. It's more about managing expectations. So people would say, we basically just, and I know Blue, you were doing this, like we're using Zoom and it's going to be all fully engaging. And I'd say, let's manage our expectations a little bit. How much engagement do we really need back from the audience? Do we need to see them on the screen? Do we need to hear them? Do we need to pull them into production? In a live event, I don't often shoot the person who's asking the question. I just want the audience to hear the question and be able to respond. So we would try and manage those expectations and say, for the most part, we're pushing out, but we're using other tools, like we use Slido a lot, to engage the audience, to get their questions, get some conversations happening. And that was about the extent of the hybrid. Now, we did do some bigger Zoom things, and I think people were met with, it was okay. It wasn't as engaging as it could have been. Maybe people had more problems because they're all having to deal with their own technology, and we're constantly muting people and whatnot. So kind of the technology got in a way when they tried to fully engage, and they didn't have the budgets to do it. Everybody thinks, as you guys know, well, I can just set up my laptop and do a Zoom. Why can't I just do this in a conference with 1,000 people? Well, it's very different. So one area I saw the shift from all three was in churches. So churches went from live audiences in the beginning of March to fully virtual. And when they were fully virtual, there were 3 cameras with tally lights, and that was their entire audience. And I talked to my entire audience, and I didn't say, we'll see you out in the atrium for cookies afterward, because that wasn't happening. They could talk exactly to the whole audience, eye to eye, the whole time. And then when live people started coming in, all of a sudden we saw people on the virtual or on the stream drop off. Because now all of a sudden, the pastor's talking to the people, and I moved from being the only audience to being the fly on the wall. And people didn't like being the fly on the wall anymore. So now it's about, when I talk to people about doing a hybrid event, I see the hybrid piece as the sidecar. If we're doing the main event, 75-80% of our time is spent on that. Now there's this sidecar. It's a cheaper price. People aren't going to get as much value, but for whatever reason, they can't make it to your event, and we're giving them something. Now, one of the pieces that people have really liked is in events where you had maybe a plenary, and then we had one that had 300 or some breakout sessions. So we had all of those recorded, and we had people record their own. There wasn't the budget to studio record them all. But people said this was great, because when I went to a live event, there were 20 I wanted to see and 5 slots. But now, since it was all online, I got to see all 20. And people are saying, that's something we want to carry on. We know we're not going to record all these breakouts. There just isn't the power to do it. But we're going to stick with this. Every presenter records their presentation, and we make that available online as an add-on or a sidecar to our live event. So I don't know if it's fully integrated hybrid that may work. I think that has complications. But having it as a good sidecar, and we have people now who are saying, well, and we did one of these even before COVID. Here's the live room, and we're going to have our hosts who are saying, hey, welcome to our virtual audience. This is how you engage. And now we're throwing it to our speaker. It goes live. Then it comes back to the hosts, and those hosts are fully engaged on the virtual audience only.
So that's almost like what we're doing at TV, right? So that's a very effective, that's an ESPN, a talk show, or anything that's having a host, and then you're throwing it to the content, and then you're bringing the content back. But that's the thing about hybrid events that they can't do from the stage. It's not as fluid. For the few people that I could think of that could pull it off, I can count them on my hands, because they're having a split. Like you said, Blue is like, or Phil, both of you good said, it's like you're focused on the camera. You're looking at the camera the whole time. What about all those other people? And that could be 50, it could be 100, it could be 2,000, 10,000. But one or the other is going to suffer. So, Blue, do you think there's anything that could be done to improve the viewer experience in hybrids that is primarily catering to the on-site attendance? Does it need to be a separate feed, a separate production in itself?
Well, so, I think in large part, it depends on what the outcome is that you're looking for, right? A lot of our clients we work primarily in the educational space. Let's call it personal development and business development. One of our clients is Tony Robbins, and the rest of our clients want to be Tony Robbins. So I think that's probably the easiest way to say it. Let's hope my clients don't all see this recording. But what they are looking for is they're looking for their event to produce content, connection, and community. Primarily, that's really what they're hoping for, right? Because if the attendees feel connected to the community and get great content, then they're going to want to take the next step with the host. And all of those people have something that is the next step. Usually it is maybe another event that's coming up. In some cases, it's a coaching program, whatever that looks like. And in order to achieve the connection in the community that's required to take the next step, the hybrid events are really difficult, right? Virtual did great because we were able to produce a tremendous amount of connection, right? That, Phil kind of said it, everybody has a front row seat with virtual because I'm paying attention to the camera.
Yep.
And when you go to hybrid and you're now kind of a voyeur experience, or I'm watching a live stream, even if it's great content that is highly produced and is really awesome, I'm still watching something else going on. And there's no connection and community that is being driven. The connection and community component is in the room, right? It's on site at the event. That's really what winds up happening in a hybrid situation from my experience so far.
And do you think that, speaking of that connection community, do the watch parties, does that come into play?
I think the watch parties the watch parties are interesting. Although, listen, we're in the event space. So part of where I feel as an event producer is I like to control the environment and control the experience. And watch parties kind of lets that control go a little bit into somebody else's home, somebody else's office. Now, we've contemplated regional watch parties that are driven by the host, but now you're talking about huge budgets, right? I mean, now you're not just putting on 2 events at the same time. We're also setting up a watch party in, 4 or 5 major cities around the country, possibly around the world, and your budget continues to creep up and up and up. I love the concept of it as a production company. I'm not sure our hosts are going to love it as the people paying the bill.
Right. And what do you think, Phil? I mean, do you think that most people are going to want to just, are they going to go back to this, I can just watch and be that fly on the wall? Or do you think now that they've given them a taste of this interaction, like we did with the Tony Robbins events, where he's talking one-on-one, and that's that special moment that so many people just can't fathom. If you were in a crowd of 100,000, they'd never have that. But he has that ability to pull somebody off the video wall and say, let's talk about you. And that's that one-on-one thing. But can we develop that for the streams or the virtual world that's out there now that's watching in a hybrid situation?
I think it's very difficult to do the both. And I think like Blue is saying, something's got to give somewhere. Or if it's in a hybrid event, while he's engaging with this virtual person, I'm checking out, they're having their moment. A lot of it depends a little bit on the presenter, how they handle dealing with people. Some advantages, I think, on the hybrid piece is you can get a lot of questions answered. Like we usually, like I said, we use texting and question answer on their phones. And then we will typically have a moderator who's filtering those and comes and engages on behalf as a proxy for the audience. But that also allows all those questions to be captured and be answered later. So they'll say, we didn't answer these live, but don't worry, afterwards, Tony's going to get to these, or we're going to get to these, or whatever, and you can up-click your questions, whatever. So there is some added on the hybrid side that live, if they don't call on me, I just never get my question answered. At least this way it's being captured. And as a presenter, I can get maybe a greater feel of what people want to know about, because everybody has a chance to text in. So I think there's some benefits to it. You do, I think, see, I'm a gearhead. So for me, I'm always looking at the technology. One of my partners on Inspire Meeting, she's more about the touch part. Where our company tag is like high tech, high touch. She's about the touch part. I don't care. I'm about the tech part. So for me, there's some technical pieces that I try and help out. And one was a simple one that I said, which was tally lights. If the presenter doesn't know which camera's on, they don't know which one to talk to. So I'll often encourage, it's a big piece to say that big red light is your entire online audience. So make sure that you're reaching out to that one often. If you don't have that piece of technology, those people are going to get thrown away almost completely. So
Right.
I think there's some technological pieces we can use. I think it's, again, and we've talked about, it's all about managing the expectations. I can't charge the same price for someone to be virtual that I can for them to be live, because I think they are going to get a different experience. But I think it's about also trying to say, how can we capitalize on the things that we're able to do in virtual that we can't do live? Tony clearly cannot talk to every audience member, but he could capture all their questions in some way on the virtual side.
What I think is really interesting as production companies is there's an opportunity to expand our repertoire, right? Because where I think we're headed is, if people did virtual events this year and had success, they experienced wider audiences where, people who would never have gotten on a plane non-COVID times to come to their event were experiencing them. And then they also probably had great success in person. And I think there's an opportunity for us as production companies to start producing both, right? We've already started to have conversations with clients who are excited about going back to work, or going back to in-person events, and not for financial reasons, actually, because they made more money virtually than they ever did in person.
Very true.
And not by
Very true.
little, like significantly. But they also enjoy the experience as a host. That one of the things that we could never replicate, and Phil, I don't know if you had this experience as well, but we could never replicate the auditory response. Visual response, no problem. But auditory response, every time we tried to replicate the actual auditory response of people clapping or people laughing, or say yes, I agree, right? We had to fabricate that through a laugh track, essentially. That was the only way to get where we needed to go. So hosts miss that. So I think they're going to go back in person for their ego, but those that really enjoyed the financial benefit of virtual will probably stay virtual and have both, right? I'm going to do in person a little bit for my ego, and I'm going to do virtual a little bit for my wallet. And both are going to allow me to have more impact and more reach. And for us as production companies, we now have two bites at the apple, right? Two opportunities to work with our clients.
Very true.
So
Very true.
Something to think about.
No,
Yeah,
I agree with you completely.
I think that's a great insight. We didn't, it takes a good presenter to be able to talk into a camera with no feedback and somehow keep it engaging. I mean, there is so much dry stuff that happened, because there's and they say it's so difficult. I don't know if that joke is working or not. I remember there's a politician here who made a horrible joke, and he says, boy, I wouldn't have done that if I'd been able to read the room. It looked good on paper, and that's the only thing I had when I went into recording this thing, but I never would have done that. There was another point I had, but I forgot it now. So, about the financial piece. Yeah, we did see, huge financial savings. And sometimes you think this virtual is like, wow, this is going to cost them a lot of money. But they didn't rent a room. They didn't rent an arena. They didn't buy a chicken dinner for all these people. They saved a ton of money. Catering. So we see people saying, you know what, maybe we used to do one event or two events a year. Maybe we're going to do one virtual, one live. And then we had the university here was doing a major push to some super high-end donors. They'd worked on this for 2 years. And they said, we saved so much money. We didn't have to pay for flights, any of this. And all those 35 top donors got all the information. They could sit in their living room. Some people don't want to have to take a day to travel, go to an event, talk to a bunch of people, travel back. So we're seeing a lot on the corporate side saying we're going to do both, but we're going to slice our budget in half because we're not doing all these live events. Some are just going to be in corporate, talking out just to my company. I'm recording them as videos now. That was great.
Well, speaking of the travel aspect of it, is like how it should be easier for us. And I'm starting to see a little bit of it, but are you guys seeing it too, where these speakers that maybe we couldn't afford them to come out and do a one day for this, like a small fundraiser type thing, what we consider big, but it's technically a small fundraiser. It's not the Emmys or something, right? So whenever they come out and do that, it could be in the tens, it could be in the hundreds of thousands to afford that talent to come in. So do you think that they're going to be basically buying into this whole, well, let me just drop in. Let me just come in over Zoom or come in over whatever to be able to still get that notoriety of that person, but they don't have to be on site. Do you see that's going to be a bigger thing moving forward?
I think it's, we've been doing a lot of that. Typically, they will record their piece and we'll play that back, and then we'll bring them in live for Q&A. So their amount of time, most of them, I was really happy they actually did custom record for that client, which I was proud of. They didn't, I mean, as a speaker, I would have maybe said, I'm just going to record my shtick. And yeah, you can take it, download it, cost you $5,000, download it, run it. But they did tailor it. But what did that take? A half an hour in their basement to do it? They had a good studio, good mic. And then they sat in for 15 minutes of a Q&A. And they probably made their entire nut that they would normally make, but the client didn't have any of those added expenses. So in some ways, it's a win-win. And for the most part, like we just did a live event where the keynoter was brought in on replay, which I was like, I don't know. On the other hand, they watched him on a TV screen in the event anyway, and they never really talked to him. He just did his thing. They didn't get when he was live, they didn't get a lot of time to interview him. He did his thing and he got on a plane and left. So I think there are some potential win-wins there. Is that what you're seeing, Blue, or not?
Yeah, I got an opportunity a couple times this year to speak to folks from NSA and the National Speakers Association, and the general consensus, which whatever, the general consensus from what I've found is some of them actually find that it's harder to do the recordings. In part because what some of them were experiencing are hosts then asking for changes to the recordings. And which is interesting, right? Because in person, when you do it live, there's no possibility for that. Like the person, he goes out, does his thing, tells a joke, maybe it's off color, whatever, but there's no recourse, right? You can't go, hey, can you go redo that talk, but pull out that joke because, but with virtual, when it's recorded, they can do that. So speakers, from what I've seen, price point wise hasn't changed much, but to Phil's point, travel expenses are way down, and speakers who require first-class travel both ways, if you're really going celebrity, they may require a private plane. Travel in some cases can cost as much as the keynote fee, depending on who it is. So, I definitely think there's opportunity for savings, but not where you might think, if that helps.
Do you think that in the streaming side, Phil, do you feel like that it's just going to go back to normal where some of these larger events that I know you work on, are they just going to say, okay, just do that same old thing you did a couple of years ago? Or do you think they're going to say, well, can we add this into it? Can we add that into it? Or do you think those clients are going to still care about the streaming people, even though that audience could be tens of thousands more than what's in person?
I think it depends on the event. We have one event that's a large youth gathering that we're going to be doing in Houston, and there's 20,000 participants and there's maybe 5,000 online. We've always it's been a one-way path to them. We've never really engaged them in the past. It's really meant to be a live event. That one will just be streaming out. I think the other ones, at minimum, they're going to say that audience, it has a paywall now, and they can ask their questions, and we will probably have some type of a moderator proxy for the virtual audience. At minimum, I think almost all of them are adding that. Now, we have done some where they've said, we want on the stage our two people live, and we've brought in these other presenters, but they're virtual. So we do a live person, a TV monitor, live person, TV monitor, and they have a roundtable discussion. I think there are some times where maybe if you couldn't get a person in, virtual could be an option to bring in a keynote person that otherwise they wouldn't be able to make it. But I don't know if they're going to go full. We're really trying to engage that hybrid audience as much as we were when it was just virtual. They're not an afterthought, but they're definitely a secondary audience and a primary in what I'm saying.
Well, when has streaming ever been a primary, honestly, before 2020, right? It was always, it seemed like it was always a secondary thing. It was either one, it was a cheaper version of broadcast.
Yeah, we'll give them more attention than we did at the past because people expect it. They know that we, like Blue is saying, hey, you did it in 2020. What's the problem?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll be some problems. Well, speaking of the biggest problem is timing, right? So we'd only have X amount of hours in the day. And Phil, I know you've got a out that you need to get out to. So thank you for your time today, Phil. And Blue and I are going to continue this conversation a little bit more and discuss a little bit about what is the future if hybrid isn't the magic pill. What is the future?
I mean, I kind of said it a little bit already. I think for a lot of clients, and to Phil's point, it largely depends on the outcome, right? Like, what is it that you need your audience to experience as a part of your live event? And what do you want the next step to be, right? For a lot of associations, the next step is simply let's make sure they renew. The live event is an opportunity for networking and a little bit about some education and, you know, maybe CME credits or something along those lines if you're medical or, you know, in a space that requires certification, something along those lines. I think a lot of those people will probably, you know, virtual will just kind of go back to being a live stream. You know, you said it was a little bit of an afterthought, a secondary audience. I think in some cases it was a tertiary audience, to be honest with you. So I think that'll happen for a lot of associations. In my experience, associations and corporate did not have the same success with virtual, mostly, especially in the association world, because they had a complete lack of creativity. And they did not, from what I was able to see, they did not really dive into virtual the same way some of our audience or some of our clients did in the personal development and business development space, where the outcome wasn't just let's just make sure they renew their membership. The outcome was we're doing an event to give you a taste of something so that you take the next step, right? So that you enroll in the next bit of education or whatever that looks like. And people where their entire revenue focus for the year was their event and who chose not to kind of hunker down and hope they had enough reserves to make it through 15 months or whatever, 16 months or 17 months or 42 months, whatever it's looking like this year.
50 years.
Yeah, exactly. Those people realized that they only had virtual as an option and really dove into it. And as they dove into it, if they did it well, they realized that not only could they save a bunch of money, but they were making as much money as they were in person. So they saved, and in some cases, because of larger audiences, they made more. It's like, I don't think virtual is going away. Now, for some audiences, for some, like in the corporate space, maybe on team stuff, you know, or large company internal gatherings, you may still see some virtual. In associations, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of it. But I think a lot of folks who are looking to expand their reach and expand their audience are going to be looking hard at virtual.
Do you think that on the virtual side for the entertainment space, do you think that I mean, that's a totally different space than we work in a lot, but it is something that I feel like has a lot of opportunity there. So full virtuals, they've done like Tomorrowland has been completely virtual, which is an EDM quote concert. It's a DJ, but those type of events, do you feel like they have? I do. I feel like they have a better chance of survival in a virtual world because of one of the, like you said, no expenses. I mean, we could do that in your studio there. We put a guy in front of with a couple they don't even use turntables anymore, but you know, a couple of
things that turn.
Fake turbos. Yes, exactly. We put a couple of fakey things in front of in front of the LED wall. We create a world for them to be in. Use XR, for instance. I see that as just a great leaping forward of virtual reality and augmented reality together to give them that world, their own experience. It's that creativity flowing and things like that. Do you think that kind of look, that XR just bigger than the world kind of feel, do you think we could trickle that into our corporate events and into some of these other verticals?
Man, I hope so. right? And I think in the end, it's going to come down to experience, outcome, and budget, and what's the
Sure.
client looking for. When it comes to music, you went the EDM route. I in my head, when I think about virtual and what I absolutely wish we saw some artists do this year, and we didn't, again, because I think of a lack of creativity. Oddly enough, on the artistic side, right? How did these people not get creative about this? But in my head, what I kind of wish we saw this year was a little bit of a return to MTV Unplugged, right? Where you had because we could have created some amazing experiences. Think about that stage that we have for Tony, or the one that we've worked on in Vegas, or even our studio here, where you have a band set up. Maybe it doesn't have to be unplugged. It doesn't have to be acoustic, but that kind of like more intimate environment. And they have a wall of their audience who they're interacting with. And in between songs, that they can talk and tell stories and just be a little bit more unplugged. I think we could have seen some amazing concert experiences that were far more intimate than anything we've ever done, and also sounded better, incidentally, because typically the live sound experience, live music is a ton of fun, but you don't go for the sound quality, right?
Unless you sit right in front of the audience, right in front of the actual front of house, which is my perfect spot every time. So thinking of that, they did do that. Who was it? Was it Metallica that did it? Or tried. They tried. Technically, they tried. I think it was Metallica. It was an older rock band, but anyway, they failed because of just technology. They didn't understand the technology well enough, so audio suffered. In that we fought from June to probably July to figure out the right settings in the Zoom world to get the audio just right.
And Zoom also gave us a massive update. Like Zoom gave us a massive update somewhere. I want to say it was September-ish, when they enabled high fidelity sound. Like that changed the game. Like when that happened, all of a sudden, when we played piped music into meetings, it now sounds like Spotify, right? It sounds good. Is it is it high? Is it lossless audio? No. But I mean, honestly, nobody really can tell what the hell they're listening to.
But it doesn't sound like this.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is what it had before.
And you get a good audio engineer who levels it out properly. I mean, that's not me, obviously, because levels it out properly probably isn't the right terminology. But I think that for sure. Yeah. I did not know that Metallica, or I didn't see that. I would have loved to have seen a lot of that. Because
it wasn't Nickelback. I know that for sure. It wasn't Nickelback, but I'll have to go back and look. But it was interesting because they tried to do that same thing, and that's what I thought.
Right? They would have been stuck in Canada under lockdown and quarantine. I'm not sure they
don't even let the streams out. Even that's true. So with the future of musicians doing that, one of our Texas country guys, Pat Green, I like his music, so I watched several of his, and he was doing this, and it was just he would just turn on his phone, go onto Facebook, and just do a Facebook Live, and just read the little bit of the few different comments. Well, what a few? There's a bunch of different comments. He's got a huge fan base, but that was his delivery of giving back to his fans. But I agree with you. I'm really shocked that so many of these creative types that we have out there, they just kind of clammed up and said, "Oh well, we're not touring, so I guess we're done." I think that the VIP experience can be huge with this, with this technology that we have now. Huge, and those people would pay more because they're avid fans. They're way invested.
For sure, we did for one of our clients, we had it was Tony Pitbull. Performed one night.
I remember that. Yeah, right.
And it was awesome. Like the people at home, like we could, because we do all of our virtual events where the host can see, and this, obviously, but the host can see, or the person performing can see a good amount of people. And in his case, probably about 800 people right in front of him on a super large LED wall, right?
Yep.
And from what I understood, I did not have this conversation personally, but from what I understood, he really enjoyed the experience. But this happened like just a few months ago, right? So it was almost as the world was starting to open up is when somebody finally got on one of these stages and performed at a high level and got to experience that. I think for sure had he done that in July when we did our first stadium event, he would have figured out how to do more of that, right? Because
Right.
now I can totally see like a big name draw, doing a concert that is like Live Aid style, that is massive, right? Like
Yeah.
a million person concert,
Mhm.
and you only have to perform once. Oh my God, crazy. Anyway.
Yeah. I agree completely. So in event production, thinking about
Mhm.
what's next besides the hybrid and the magic pill part, in my opinion, XR, what's next in event production to kind of that bridge this gap? Do you feel like that it's just going to be a balance now, so that we're going to have, like we said, we're getting two bites of the apple?
You know what? I don't know. Like the reality is prior to 2000, the event space really hasn't changed in
No,
years,
that
right?
is
Like,
very
and
true.
possibly
Very true.
hundreds of years.
Yep.
And I think that you're going to see some people try and do some interesting things. We've had conversations with people where they're like, what if we sent everybody an Oculus, goggles? And I'm like, well, first off, it'll last about an hour and a half, and then everybody will need to get plugged into an outlet or something.
Right.
So I'm not sure that technology is there yet, although I do think that there's the potential for it in the future. I think if we continue to see the same type of technology experimentation that we saw in the last 15 months, we may see some interesting things happen in the next 3 to 4 years. But I think we're a good distance from seeing anything of significance on the live event front. On the virtual event front, my hope is we can at some point figure out the auditory response. I think that's the next big thing. We can figure out the auditory response issues with virtual events. I think we'll see virtual events continue to be greatly successful. And, I know for us as a production company, we're going all in on virtual, mostly because I like waking up in my own bed. Like I got
Amen, brother.
used to, right? I got used to not
Amen.
seeing hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And I was telling somebody the other day, if I never see the inside of a hotel ballroom again, it'll be too soon. Of course, that's not likely to happen because we all have clients that want to do in person, and some clients we're not willing to give up. But my wife Barry and I have been talking pretty significantly or pretty heavily about what do we do now that people are wanting a little bit more hybrid, a little bit more in person. And for us, I want to stay with virtual. I mean, we make more money. It's more fun. To Phil's a bit of a gearhead. I know you are too. I think I'm close to you guys, but I love playing with the technology, and virtual gives us so much more tech to play with than in person. So,
do
anyway,
you feel like that so many people think that the virtual is easier because so many people jumped into it? Like, I noticed, and you probably noticed the same thing, that a lot of people that got into virtual were coming from the event space that were on-site event people, or maybe they were coming from just who knows what as far as a job, and then they said, so I could just download this software and I could just do this. I'm now there's actually a term called a Zoom jockey. That's the person that understands Zoom and can move things around in Zoom to create a production. But do you feel like that we flooded the market was because of the needs that were there? There were so many people, there's so much demand. We kind of flooded the market with that. What's going to happen whenever we go? I feel like that what's going to happen is we're going to go back into the space, and these event people, I'm already seeing a lot of that happen in the different Facebook groups and others, that people are asking for people. They're starving for skilled techs because those techs left the industry altogether. I kind of feel like that's going to happen. I do feel like that there's only a few Well, let's say there's a small percentage. There's a small percentage of people that can do virtual right. And so it's fluid and so it works, and that, you're not just turning on Zoom, because anybody
Yeah,
can
I
do
think
that.
no, you're totally right. I think most people and most production folks in the space, when they say hybrid, what they really just mean is let's do an in-person event and live stream. That's really what
I
it
agree.
boils down to.
Absolutely.
And that's not
Yes.
that right. That's the same thing we were doing before the pandemic that never worked properly anyway.
Agreed.
I agree with you. I think that um, there's going to be some pressure on the space, and I think there's going to be some cost implications to that as well, because people who got furloughed, I mean, hotels are experiencing this right now, right?
Mhm.
People who got furloughed had to figure things out. They didn't just go sit on their couch and wait for the hotel or the AV company to hire them back. They went and got jobs.
Yeah.
And especially folks in the who were freelancers really had to. So, and maybe they got better jobs. Who knows, right? So I don't know
Right.
what's going to happen on that front. But I will say that I do think there's a tremendous opportunity for those who were doing virtual right, and having great connection and community driven events through virtual, where audiences were experiencing this amazing interaction and this amazing intimacy that nobody thought was possible with virtual. Those people, there's going to continue to be a space for them, in my opinion, and I hope so, because I'd like to be one of them.
Yeah, I agree completely too. I feel like and I'm a big proponent of remote operations, and we've been doing this for years, well before we even had to with the pandemic. And I feel like that is still just going to, now that, especially in my sports industry, especially in that, they got a taste of it. The B counters figured it out, and they're like, why are we shipping all these people around? So what I feel like is what's going to happen is we're going to have our A teams. So our A team is going to be able to do more events because they're not having to be flown around. They're not having to drive around. They're going to be able to just be at their house or be at their studio. I mean, I never stopped coming to the office because it's literally a mile and a half from my house, and I was the only one here anyway, so it didn't really matter. So for me, it was no real big difference, but it was nice, like you said, not having to look at another hotel room was a
Yeah.
phenomenal thing. I love to travel, but after you do it for 25 plus years steadily, and you're traveling somewhere between 150 to 200 nights a year, it gets old. And I think
Well, and
that's
it's
a big
amazing
thing that's
how
changed.
quickly it gets old when you don't have to do it anymore,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
over the
yeah.
course of the last 15 months, we just went to an event a couple of weeks ago that was a hybrid event, and it was an extra 2 days of travel, plus the pre-day wasn't quite as smooth because you're kind of figuring out your own space. Part of your pre-day is setting everything up, right? When people come to our studio,
Mhm.
I don't have a pre-day of set time. I have a pre-day of rehearsals, but there's none of the other stuff that goes along with it.
Right, right.
And being able to wake up, you're closer than I am. I'm 2.4 miles from my house, but having to wake up, drive 2.4 miles, or in my case, ride my one wheel to work, and roll into the office and walk upstairs, fire up the studio, and go. I mean, man, what an experience! And I
Yeah,
think a pretty cool experience for hosts who no longer have to deal with hotels and convention centers or arenas and food and beverage minimums and make sure I hit my room block and all sorts of stuff that us AV guys never really worry about. But the hosts have to. So
right. And
lots there.
the stress and everything involved within that. Agreed.
Yeah.
Well,
Like if my
I
attendees don't
this
show up, the fact that I have to pay for their hotel rooms, are
you
you
still
kidding me?
have to do it.
No, nope, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, at least you just watch the numbers of what's online, and then you can stress out at that point because you did or didn't do your marketing correctly, right?
That's a
So
whole other problem for sure.
yeah, that is for sure. And what do you think about in the space that we're talking about, on delivery? So this is something that's always intrigued me too. Uh, Back when we first started doing the professional tennis, we had our own servers, and so I could watch and I could see that I saw the change over the course of 5 years. I could see the change of everybody watching on a PC, and then it moved to everybody sort of watching on a PC, and then it moved to I could see which browsers they were using. Then I saw the uptick of mobile devices, iOS devices and mobile devices. And then it just went, psh. And now everybody, I would say, I'm going to say everybody, but I would say a large amount of consumption these days is on that mobile device. So how do we provide a good experience to that mobile device, that person watching the mobile device or interacting with that mobile device? Because as you know, it's very hard to interact when you're trying to watch on a mobile device and
drive.
type a text or hit a up on a like, or not I'm going to say type of the text, but like chat, but have it to be part of it. So don't you feel like that's a big challenge that we have in these hybrid event or virtual events?
Perhaps. What I will tell you is our events tend to be multi-day formats and long days. And initially with virtual, there was a lot of thought like we have to shorten the days, right? We can't do days that start at 9 in the morning and go till 9 at night, even if we have breaks in the middle of them. And the tact that we took with all of our events was the exact opposite. We said, no, we need to keep as live events. We didn't transition to treating our live events as webinars or virtual events. We kept to long format days. Now, we did change our timing a little bit, right? Instead of starting at 9, we start at 11 Eastern because we wanted to factor in our West Coast audience. But that then just meant that we typically go till about 7 to 9 o'clock at night, depending on what day it is. And I did this about 2 months ago because I was curious. I went back and I looked at our enterprise Zoom account to see how many people were on mobile versus PCs. And we have about 80% of our audience on PCs. Of that 80%, this may say something about the audiences that we tend to serve. About 50% of them are Macs. And then of the remaining 20%, about 10% of them are iPads. So larger format, larger format portable devices. So only about 10% of our audience who is watching these events is watching on mobile. Yeah, it's the exact opposite of what people think.
And I think I think it's that has to do with the age, though, right? So the general age of the person watching.
More with the amount of time that our events are. Because our events are longer format, right? It's
battery's not going to last.
Well, the battery's not going to last, and do you really want to hold up your phone like this for that period of time? They don't.
True.
Right? So it's
is the next step to get to the big screen? Is that the next step?
So.
Is that the real goal? Is to get on that 70 inch that's in the living room and have some interaction?
Figure out an Apple, like an Apple TV app or an Android or a Roku TV app that allows you to stream.
Okay, so that brings us into the dual screen, right? So then it's I've got the mobile that I'm talking to and interacting with, but at the same time I'm watching on the big screen.
Yeah. Well, and that's where our dashboards come in, with you. Right? So for us, we are the event platform that I mentioned, Obvio, allows our clients to produce dashboards or short-term membership sites for their virtual events. And that's where a lot of the interactivity happens. That's where, if they want to click an emoji, that happens. So a lot of our clients or a lot of our attendees will be watching on a TV or on a larger format screen, but then possibly have their phones open to post chats or to to click on an emoji or to interact with the event in some way. So they're watching on their computer, but they're interacting with the event on their screen. So what is important for us is we need to make sure that those dashboards are mobile responsive. But I'm not worried about the actual viewing experience for the event on mobile, because.
But use it as a tool, like a remote to be interactive, and I think that there's a perfect bridge right there. So that also could appeal in a hybrid way, because you could use it inside in the on-prem. And
I love what Phil was talking about with Slido, right? And getting Slido to, for the folks who are in the room, how you ask your questions is not going up and going to the mic. It's posting your questions on Slido, on the dashboard or wherever he's doing that. And then that's a way to merge your two audiences so everybody gets
Agreed.
equal billing. So it's
Agreed.
interesting thought for sure.
Agreed. Well, Blue, thank you so much for joining me today. This is, as always, it's enjoyable to trade things back and forth with you. And glad we got Phil involved for a little while. And this has been a great experience for, and I hope a lot of people can pick up a few things here and there that we rambled on for a little while. And maybe next time we'll just go ahead and book a 10-hour day just to go ahead and make sure we get everybody on all the time zones.
I mean, that sounds good. We'll probably get them all on PCs at that point. We won't have to worry about the mobile experience.
This is true. Well, we want it for the second hand. We want it for those inputs. But thanks so much for the time. And if we have any questions now, we're going to go to a question and answer period. And I'll be taking some questions at this point. Hello, everybody. My name is Jef Kethley. I live in Texas.
Sorry about that, guys. So I do have some questions for you, Jef. The first one I have here is from Andy Lipnick. What data points do you present to a client to show them the value of mounting a virtual only event instead of a hybrid event? Also, are there certain types of events that are better suited to digital first events, i.e. movies, premieres, house of worship, live music, anything of that sort?
Unfortunately, we're not into it deep enough, I don't believe, to actually have a lot of really good information. I mean, it was amazing whenever we started talking with some of these virtual events that we were doing. It was really amazing to see how the tide turned to them when I'm specifically the ones that Blue and I were working with the really large groups about bettering yourself and self-improvement, and also the sales side, both of it too. They made more money in the virtual events, substantially more, not just because of cost savings, but just overall percentage, because they were able to engage those people and talk to them in the eye whenever they were in the crowd, when those same attendees may have been in a crowd of 60, 70, 100,000 people. The host could never get out there and really talk to them one-on-one and really appeal to them and get them motivated like they could in a virtual environment. And so they figured out they could do better, and they did. But they still, as Blue said, have that ego of well, I like to hear the crowd. I want to hear the crowd. I want to see the crowd. I want to see the faces, truly one-on-one. So I think until we kind of see a little bit more of what we're seeing as numbers, it's going to be hard to just use a metric that's applying to everybody, because I think every group is different too. Medical is going to be different. General conventions are going to be different than these sales events and stuff that we were doing too. So I think it's a little bit different on all of them. I'm sorry, it's a terrible answer.
No, that's okay.
Tough question.
I think that's actually a good answer, because there's some elements you said, that things that I didn't think about, right? Because I come from the very technical side, and I try to be minded on both sides, with the business and the technical. And there's always nuggets of knowledge when it comes to the business side that I don't always I'm not quick to grasp, right? But then you hear it and you're like, oh, that makes sense why we're on this side of this, because on the business side, there's a whole thing that isn't being created yet, right? And that's maybe an avenue that needs to be looked at more, right? Like with the marketing side and the commenting, is figuring out how to determine the value of that. And you guys have some statistics and numbers already. Maybe there's a pool that needs to go into with other people to see, what's really going on. I know people say the church stuff a lot. Maybe the church also has some information and feedback that can add to that pool. So saying, hey, if you do a virtual and you do XYZ to XYZ on average, these are what's considered to be good versus what we think would be good sometimes. Another question I got here for you is from Alex Jacob. And he says, with all virtual and hybrid events, your competition is quite literally everything else going on in the world. Close to home, it's kids, pets, etc. Bigger picture, everything else we have asked for our attention, emails, text, social media. Is it possible to keep the attention of an audience these days?
It's all possible. It's just, is it probable? I guess. No, I do feel like that so much that we are striving to compete. When you're in the virtual, if you're going to an event, you're committed to going to that event. Yeah, you might there no might. You will tune out at some point. You'll get a text, you'll get a message from somebody, you'll get a phone call, maybe. But whenever you are at that event, you're at that event. Whereas in the virtual world, and you're doing these virtual events, the person that's watching or participating, they may be on their phone. They may be like me with a big monitor set up with 8 different things going on, multitasking it all the time. I mean, I don't feel like that the virtual events you get as much focus as you can if you had those people on site, on prem. But that's our job, is to make it better, right? So our jobs as producers, make it better.
Correct. And one of the things that I try to do the most when I'm doing these, right, is not just in between with the hosting stuff and trying to create some kind of intimacy, but I think the chats is also very important. And when people fall on, I've seen, and we've talked about this on the show, I've seen the dark side of that, where if you don't engage with the community that's online, it gets real dark real quickly and it spirals out of control. So being able to be there and be present and at least communicate what's going on to them in a manner that they know you are the host or the representative of the company can definitely keep the audience involved, as well as that. And then I'll mention as well, you and me we're used to this setup here. We do this a lot. And I noticed very quickly that Blue's setup was that very broadcast news anchor type of setup where you could see the table a little bit in the shot. You can see his arms coming on here. You can see the microphone. Like that look, I think, is a little more appealing when it comes to these shots than what we're used to right now. And I think moving forward with hybrid or virtual events in general, the way we present this and do things and the way that there's a show within a show is definitely a thing.
I would agree. I was noticing kind of the same thing because, and I told the guys, they asked me, it's like, well, what do you want us to come in as? Because I know they both have LED wall studios, and I expected what Phil showed up with. I expected that because I expected him to show off. Why not? Right? I mean, you have the tools, you got that.
Right.
That is Blue on the other side was that's his comfortable studio. He calls it his coffee studio or stuff, but that he uses that as I do now. This is my studio space here is just a simple green screen in the background. Green, now it's gray, but thank you, Brody. But the difference is when you're in that quote set, it's familiar, it's comfortable,
right.
it's something that you're used to, and I kind of got that away at the beginning of the pandemic and stuff when it was on office hours quite a bit, and that was something that I've noticed. And speaking of them, they are pushing for the shot that I'm on right now that you're on. They're pushing for this really tight kind of shot. I agree with you. I feel like the quote that the little bit wider shot, and you get to see a little bit more. It just depends on the content. If you're talking to somebody, I don't necessarily want to head just like right there in my face the whole time. It's nice to have a little bit different and have a little bit of something around them just to kind of set it. The backgrounds, I do feel like that having a not necessarily a big high motion background, but just some kind of motion or something in the background is a little bit better than just this drab gray that I have right here. It just so happens that's what I had today because we just spun and did a different direction. But I do feel like that the look of what's the content that's in the call, or the content that's in the person that's presenting, or the content that's there, it is very important. I would prefer to not necessarily have a bunch of background of someone's apartment or house or whatever. I would prefer it to be a little bit more, and that's what office hours is trying to go with, is just try to make it more uniform across the board. But in some ways, it's kind of cool that you get an insight into those people's houses or into their rooms. It's not as interesting as much anymore because a lot of people are staging them and building studios. I mean, that's what Blue had there, was a built studio for that purpose. But it's showing his style and Barry's style of their, they call that their podcast room, I think is what they call it, their podcast, which they do 4 or 5 different podcasts every week. So that's a set studio, set space. But I do feel like that we need to give content that is applicable to what we're presenting to, or what we're talking about too. So you can't, it's not going to be a one-all fit all. And I think that's where some of the virtual events are going to have to be a little bit pushing the envelope. We're going to have to start stepping up. We had the pandemic buy. So we went by, we made it work. Now it's time to take the technology to the next step. So I'm talking XR, I'm talking AR, but especially going into that next level of bringing people into a virtual world. Those are the parts that I think we'll see more so on the virtual events, or in not just streaming events in general, but virtual events themselves.
Well, Jef, I think you said some of the key words there that talks about our next speaker coming on right now with us. So before I let you go, any final words you want to tell the audience before I let you go for the rest of the day?
It was a pleasure being with you guys here today, and look forward to the next and upcoming AV Educate Tech Talks and things like that. I'm actually going to be packing and going on site for the next couple of weeks. I'll be out doing some events, so that's kind of nice to, as we're talking about virtual events today, I'm actually going to be on prem for the first time in quite a while. So looking forward to that a little bit. But yeah, it was really great having the guys that could join me, and it was great being a part of this with you, Omar. Best of luck.
Thank you so much, and congratulations getting back on the road again, which you've been doing. I know you've been doing a lot of it here and there and doing virtual, so awesome to that. Thank you for being here so much. Thank you for bringing that panel. Awesome panel, super insightful. Definitely a different perspective that we haven't thought about yet, so I'm glad you guys brought it to the table, and I'll see you soon.
All right,
Chris, great. Go ahead and take us to a mindfulness break, and we'll come back to you guys in a little bit with Kevin Ring.